there was some trouble in Pudgy Penguin paradise. So this is what happened. The community voted out Pudgy Penguins founders after they allegedly failed to deliver on goals and drained treasury funds. Now, some are arguing that the project should just be completely decentralized. So this is kind of a first in the NFT space. We really saw NFTs take off last year. And something that I think we talk about a lot with these projects is people are putting their money into the NFTs. There are these very ambitious roadmaps attached to the project. Sometimes the project's founders are not doxxed, so we don't know who they are. And sometimes people fall victim to scams. So in the case of Pudgy Penguins, no one was scammed, but the founders weren't delivering on their promises and they were voted out by the community. And I thought that this would be a great opportunity to talk about maybe how to protect yourself in the NFT space or what decentralization might look like if they're able to do this with Pudgy Penguins. So Naomi, I'm going to throw this off to you. What did you take away from the article?
I mean, it's interesting because there's all this talk about like promises that were made. And so I think like when you buy into a platform and there are promises at the outset, it's one thing if the CEO reneges on them. In this case, people actually bought into this stuff in July. And then it wasn't until September that the CEO added all of these extra things and said, oh, well, we're going to be doing educational books on NFTs. We're going to do a game and all of this. And so it kind of came after. So it's kind of an interesting situation that now the community is feeling like they had something taken away from them, whereas when they initially bought this stuff, that wasn't really part of the original deal. But I do, like, when you start talking about like draining treasury funds and they still didn't produce anything, that gets a little bit different, because if you have a community that's relying on these treasury funds, whether the purpose of the treasury funds was outlined at the outset or not, the understanding is implicit. Those treasury funds are meant to be like for development and, all of these wonderful new products built on the platform. So if they drained that's pretty dodgy there. It is very interesting to see NFT platforms or projects start to explore more decentralized territory. NFTs are completely centralized and really fragile at the moment. A lot of people don't realize how fragile they are and that their JPEG is generally on someone's specific server. It's not backed up using like Arweave or anything like that, and IPFS. Like most of these things, if the company wanted to shut these things off, get rid of it, then they could. That initial file, they could just take it or replace it or whatever. A lot of people don't realize how fragile their NFTs really are at the moment. So I applaud a community that's wanting to move more in a decentralized direction. We'll see how this turns out. Generally, things tend to be centralized because wrangling people is hard. There's a lot of friction when you want groupthink to create some sort of good outcome for a project. Generally, it doesn't work that way. So we'll see if they succeed. I've always seen NFTs as being predisposed towards a more centralized format, because I've always seen them more as part of like a gaming world where you want your NFTs to be updated, as your character gets updated in the game. Like you kind of want someone controlling that, but you just want that asset to evolve. And like, I mean, it's kind of an interesting world, and we're in this weird mid world right now. But Zach, I'll throw it to you for your thoughts.
I think like if you get more than like 10 people in any group setting, you get like all of the pros and cons of society like in a small group, right? Like you could be in the middle of the woods and be like 12 people, and it would be like the same dynamic that you would find in larger groups. And I'm always like struck by that. And I'm always fascinated by this social layer of NFT projects or DAOs or any number of things. There's this big social layer that often isn't really like discussed, I guess. We look at these things as though they're monolithic and unending and immutable, but there's this big social layer. And I think, Naomi, you're right. Like social dynamics tend to be the same over time once you hit a critical mass of people trying to make collective decisions. And I think what you're seeing here is just a great example of that within the NFT space in a way that we previously hadn't seen. We'd seen these hard forks for other blockchains in a more technical capacity, but this is sort of like a socially enforced hard fork that we saw play out in real time. And that's why this piece is really interesting. Christy, definitely curious for your thoughts on this one.
Yeah. I think that the very coolest part of this story is the whole mutiny on the HMS Pudgy Penguin. And we are looking at a possible DAO situation that didn't start off that way, didn't start off as decentralized governance. And it's not like you've got a centralized figure at the top who's saying, okay, now we are going to shift to decentralized governance. What we've got is the masses overthrowing the centralized founders, the group that was at the top, creating anarchy essentially, and then trying to create a governance model from anarchy. And that, I think, is what is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Christy. I think you're right. That's the most important part of this story, that it's like the overthrow of these founders, creating a wrapped asset that runs all this parallel system. Like, it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. Usually when you have these movements that come from, just fighting against someone else, that's all they really have in common. You don't see much cohesion once they start to splinter off, but we'll see if they can rally around something important and continue this.